What is Easter? This is a very profound question. Such a profound question, I'm actually going to take 2 episodes, quite long episodes, to answer it. What I want to show you is that Easter is not just for nursery kids or Bible freaks or to keep up the appearances. It's infinitely more profound and relevant to your life than you probably think that it is. Whether you're Christian, whether you're an atheist, whether you just don't care. Easter is pointing to something very deep and very fundamental about what it means to be human. In this episode, we're going to talk about, when we get down to it, what is the highest meaning of Easter? What is like the most fundamental meaning of Easter? It's kind of like asking, what is physics, right? Now, when we ask that question, what is physics? We might have all kinds of answers. We might talk about, well, physics is this particular school of physics, or physics is what I learned in school, or physics is what I learned in university, or physics is about business, or it's about experiments. We could come up with any kind of operational answer, any kind of limited answer, any kind of answer that caters to like a simplistic explanation, right? But when you actually ask something like, well, when we get down to it, what is the highest meaning of physics? Like, what is the most fundamental? What is it really about? And the answer to that is that it's really about the fundamental workings of the world. And it's about decoding the secrets of the world, of our universe, of this life, right? That's what physics is really about. And this is what we're going to do with Easter. And I can assure you that there is an extraordinarily profound answer to this. Christianity is not, and Easter is not, about myths and beliefs and celebrations and Easter eggs and some sort of like ritualistic tradition. And let me tell you, it's not even about the Bible, and it's not even about the church. Okay, I mean, it is, but that's kind of like saying physics is this particular branch of physics, or physics is what I learned in school. It's all secondary, where it doesn't really get to the point. It's much deeper than that. It's much more fundamental than that, right? So that's what we're going to do. We're going to really give a very detailed, nuanced, precise answer to this question of what is Easter. And it's going to be inspiring too. So here's part 1 of that explanation. This is a Deep Psychology podcast. I'm your host, Ross Edwards, writer, meditation teacher, founder of deep-psychology.com, and avid lover of all things psychological. In listening to this podcast, you're part of the worldwide deep psychology community of tens of thousands of people undertaking profound personal transformation. You can join us on any of the major podcasting platforms, and make sure to visit the site deep-psychology.com for lots of high quality resources. Let's get started. So here's my claim. My claim is that Easter means something very profound. My claim is that it celebrates or signifies or points to our own potential for awakening, which is really a transformation of identity. It's really like a transfiguration. And in the context of Easter, it's nice to think of it as like a death and a rebirth. So really what I'm saying is that Easter isn't some frivolous celebration that we do for children so that they can look for chocolate Easter eggs. And I'm also saying that it's not, in essence, it's not about the Christian festival, you know, with Lent and with Maundy Thursday and with Good Friday and so on, and you know it's a very rich tradition, Easter, and I know that. In essence, that's not what it's about. And I want this to be an inspiring claim. I mean, the the point of it is not only to be inspiring, the point of it is to transmit something to you that is very powerful and very deep and very true. I want it to be inspiring because I get the sense that most people have zero connection to Christianity whatsoever. And for a long time, I didn't either. You know, I don't think I'd ever been connected to Christianity up until a few years ago, after doing serious spiritual work. I just thought it was a lot of nonsense. You know, maybe when I was younger, when I used to get a little bit of, you know, we used to sometimes learn like Christian songs and we used to learn bits of the Bible and whatever, but it wasn't a Christian upbringing. You know, maybe I sort of believed in the stories and whatever, but I was never, I don't know if I ever really believed them. And then once I got into science and I started, you know, studying that, well, everything went under the, you know, out the window. And I thought it was a lot of nonsense. And that is true. And we're going to talk a lot about this, about why it's true that we shouldn't believe in the myths and why they're probably not true, a lot of them. But I feel like at this time, people, it's not that they need something to believe in, it's that they need to become aware of the higher levels of consciousness. Because it kind of feels to me like people want to understand what life is all about, but they have no framework now. You know, the scientific framework basically just delays the question over and over again. You know, molecules are real. You know, that's what's real. Oh, but wait, molecules are made of atoms. Oh, but wait, atoms are made of quarks and subatomic particles and so on. Oh, wait, but that's just strings. Oh, wait, but what's that made out of? And so on. It doesn't give people meaning in their lives. Knowing that your life is made of atoms or whatever, or that the world is made of atoms, well, big deal. But how about, and this is not a belief system here. This is something you can realize for yourself. And this is what this whole video is about. And this is what Easter is about. How about that your life is really an opportunity for deep transformation, and that Easter actually signifies a very important aspect of that transformation. And in that transformation, you will come to know who you really are and what the fundamental essence of all of life is. And in doing so, you'll probably realize, like I have, that Christianity has a lot to say. It's just been obscured by millennia of bullshit, power games, domination, lies, and just the usual human nonsense, basically. You know, the usual human stuff that we all know, the dark side of human history and all this. Christianity's been involved in all of that. But it conceals something that is so vital to us. Not only in this postmodern age, post-belief age, but just as about the human condition and about what life is all about. And this question about what is Easter, immediately you're probably thinking about other questions as well. For example, what is the crucifixion? Or what was the crucifixion, Ross? If you're telling me that Easter is a symbol for deep spiritual transformation, well, what is the crucifixion? We're going to answer that question. What is the resurrection? You know, Easter Sunday, that's the resurrection, right? What's that all about? We're going to answer that as well. Who is Jesus? Who was Jesus? Did Jesus exist? What were all his words about? Why was he so inspiring? What is the significance of Jesus? We're going to answer that question. What is Christianity all about? Isn't that a profound question? What is it really about? What is it about beyond the mythic Christianity? And what's it about beyond our rational, our modern rational allergy to everything religious? Quite rightly so, I say. What is it really all about? And if I'm saying that Easter is this symbol to spiritual awakening, basically, then what is Christianity? What Easter, one of the most important Christian festivals, so ingrained in our culture, even in modern, consumerist, capitalist culture, it's totally ingrained. Why? What is Christianity all about? We're going to answer that as well. And to me, the most important one, beyond all these questions, you might be having this question as well, is what is the real Christian teaching? When we really get down to it, what is Christianity trying to tell us? Not only what is Christianity really talking about? And we're going to answer that in a lot of detail here. And I just want to say, as a precursor, that the Christian teaching is fundamentally about transformation. It's not a bunch of myths made up to, provide community cohesion or to entertain school children or to tell a nice story. And it's not, to do an Easter egg hunt. The real Christian teaching is one of transformation. So that's like a little taste for you of what is to come here. So what's our approach to this question? I've talked about symbolism. I've talked about that Easter is a symbol. It's like a pointer. It's a representation of something. And that is the fundamental approach that we're taking. What we're going to do is I'm going to help you see Christianity in a symbolic fashion. I'm going to help you to see that it is really just a bunch of symbols and pointers and nothing else. It's nothing more than that. It's nothing more than a bunch of symbols and pointers. But it's nothing less than that. So on one hand, we don't want to, when we're talking about it being a bunch of symbols and pointers, we don't want to put too much weight into the symbols themselves and worship the symbols, worship the graven images. Because that then takes us away from our own spiritual transformation, which is the real matter at hand. We don't want to put too much stock in them, and you'll remember all the stories and the exact verses of the Bible and the exact sequence of events and what Jesus exactly said, because that would just be fundamentalist Christianity essentially. When you do that too much, you get lost in the symbols, you get lost in the mire. And you forget the actual, what is the reason behind all of this symbology? We can talk about the symbology all day long. We can argue all the fine points, which is not necessarily a frivolous exercise, but it is a frivolous exercise if you're not actually contacting the reality of what they're trying to represent or point to. So it's nothing more than the symbols, and it's nothing more than a bunch of symbols and pointers, but it's nothing less. So while we're not putting too much stock in the symbols and pointers, we are not taking them for granted. We're not saying, oh, well, an Easter egg is just an Easter egg. It's just it's just, it's just chocolate. It's just for, it's about businesses making money, and it's just about children eating chocolate because they like chocolate. That would be to profoundly overlook the depth of what we're talking about here. That would be to lessen the whole thing, lessen Easter, and to make it very frivolous. And the same goes for all the other symbols and pointers. We don't want to take them for granted either. We want to realize that there's a reason for the symbols and pointers. There's a reason that the stories unfold the way they do. There's a reason for the Easter story. There's a reason for the crucifixion. There's a reason for the cross as a symbol. There's a reason for the resurrection. And there's a reason for many of the fine details involved here. Again, we don't want to take this too far, as I said, but we don't want to overlook things. We don't want to just dismiss things. We have to treat them as symbols and pointers, and we have to look for the truth in those symbols and pointers. Another part of this approach is questioning all our assumptions. And this goes for me. Right now. Question my assumptions right now. Do I really know what Easter is? Do I really know? I'm doing a big talk on this, and what I'm talking about makes sense to me. It makes a lot of sense, and the Christian symbols move me a lot. But let's start again here. I want to have an open mind. I want to have a beginner's mind. I want to empty my cup. And the same goes if you have no idea what I'm talking about, and you think that the Bible is literally true. Every single detail is literally true, and it will. Historically, it happened. These are historical events, and they happened just as they apparently did. What do you really know about all of this? How do you know that Jesus even existed? How do you know that the Last Supper happened? How do you know? I know that people's beliefs are very close to their heart, and they're very close to their sense of who they are, and their sense of community, and their sense of belonging, and so on. But if we're interested in what Easter really is, we have to question these things. What do you really know about anything? How do you know that anything written in the Bible is actually true? And if you say to me, because it's written in the Bible, it's true because it's written in the Bible. And I say, well, how do you know that's true though? And you say, well, it's written in the Bible. That's not evidence. And what you'll find, you're just believing in something. You'll find that you're just believing in ideas that have been repeated to you over and over again. You're repeating a story that seems self-consistent. It makes sense that, oh, well, Jesus is about to die, so he'll have a Passover meal with his disciples. And the Bible says that it was for this reason. And then, the crucifixion, this is what happened. They captured Jesus. He was betrayed by Judas, and he was taken away, and etc., etc. It all seems very self-consistent. But what do you know? Do you know for sure? And this isn't for me, it's for you. How can you know? Were you there? Do you know someone that was there? Who wrote the Bible? How do you know? Why are the biblical facts necessarily true? If you're going to say, well, it's in Matthew or it's in Luke or whatever verse it is or whatever chapter, how do you know that's true? And even beyond that, if you're a rational person and you're sitting here listening to this out of curiosity, but you actually think it's a lot of bullshit, and you're sitting here listening and you're thinking, well, Ross, You're talking about spiritual transformation. You're talking about spiritual awakening. But the Bible's all rubbish, right? I mean, there's nothing true in the Bible. It's all just mythical nonsense. It's just it's just fairy tales at the end of the day, isn't it? You have to question your assumptions as well. No one is excluded from this. I don't care how much scientific evidence you have for whatever you want, for whatever scientific evidence you want to point to. This applies to you as well. How do you know? How do you know that the Bible isn't historical fact? How do you know? Prove that it isn't. You might find that you're just believing in the fact it's not because it suits your worldview to do that. I'm not saying I believe in the Bible as a historical fact. We'll get onto that in a minute. I actually don't believe it. But I'm open to the fact that it will be true. But if you're not open, then your mind is closed. And what that tells me is that you're not going to get close to the transpersonal stuff, to the actual like the gold that's hidden within all this junk. Because your mind is too closed. So that's one our key thing. We have to question all our assumptions. Another aspect of this approach is that we're basically seeing Christianity as yet another tradition that talks about spiritual awakening. So this is nothing new that I'm really telling you here. I mean, it's new in terms of like, it might be new to you in terms of like the Christian symbology, right? But in terms of like all the information we've acquired and all the writings about spiritual awakening and all the different traditions, this is really nothing new. It's just the same stuff in different clothes, essentially. Christianity is just another container. It's just another system. It's just another set of pointers and teachings to a universal path that is talked about in Hinduism and has been talked about in Hinduism since the very early masters that precede Christ. It's talked about in Buddhism, been talked about in Buddhism since before Buddhism. Buddhism isn't original. It is in many ways, but Buddha apparently learned from other masters of his time. It's not even the start, it's not even like it came from something. It's in Sufism, I'm not saying in all Sufism, but in the esoteric stuff, it's all there. All of this stuff is here. All of these pointers are already with us, right? Now, what I want to show you is that it's in the Easter story and it's in Christianity, just as it is in all the other traditions. Some traditions like Buddhism are much more literal about it, much more sort of rational, like do this, do that, here are the truths, blah, 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 etc. Christianity is grounded in pre-modern language. It often, especially like the Bible, that type of Christianity, it's grounded in pre-modern language. It doesn't really give you practices. It's talking about the very essence of these matters without going into a practical level. I suppose you could debate that that's true, but not in this way that Buddhism does, for example. It's not as explicit about how do we actually do this. But it's still there. It's still talking about deep spiritual truths and possibilities for us. So that is another guide for us, is to look at other traditions. If we're not sure about a symbol from Christianity, look at other traditions. What do they see? And it might be something close. It might be very closely related. It might just be not so obvious that is the case. But if we look closely, we look with a metaphorical, symbolic eye, we might realize that they actually are very close. This is neither mythical nor is it rational. And I've mentioned this, but I just want to make this very clear. Both the mythic interpretation of Christianity, which is 99% of Christianity, really. You know, the Bible is true, and Christ is our one true Saviour, and He died for our sins, and history unfolded as the Bible tells us it did, and you know, the world was created in 7 days. This is erroneous. And even if it isn't erroneous, it doesn't even matter. And we're going to talk about that in a minute as well. We're not even entering into that debate, really. I mean, listen, I have an opinion on it, but my opinion doesn't matter. What matters are the pointings and the symbols, not the historical context. If it indeed is a historical context and it's not just a bunch of allegories, it doesn't even matter. But it's not mythical. I'm not sitting here reciting the Bible. I will be quoting the Bible, but I'm doing it in a much more nuanced way. This isn't black and white. It's in the Bible. Let me point to my Bible and say it's written in the Bible, so it's true. That's not what I'm doing here. I'm not being mythical. And it's not rational either. So you rational people out there who are convinced that science tells you everything you need to know and that there's nothing in the Bible of any real value and there's nothing in spirituality of any real value. This is not what I'm doing here. I'm not sitting here throwing all of Christianity under the bus. I'm going to throw a lot of it under the bus. But what I'm throwing under the bus is the mythical part of it. What you're missing as a rational person is post-rationality. That's why rationality is only partially true. It's true in some contexts. In some contexts, rationality is a valid method. But eventually you will realize the limits of rationality if you continue to grow as a person and in faith and in spirituality. And you'll realize that it cannot really explain anything. And that it cannot touch what we're talking about here, really. It's not going to help us too much in what we're doing here, because this is post-rational. I'm going to include skeptical rationalism. You know, I'm going to look at this. When I read the Bible, for example, and when I share these truths with you, I'm not looking at it saying every single word of the Bible is true and we shouldn't question it. And it doesn't matter if it conforms to the laws of physics or the laws of like consensus reality. That's not what I'm doing, right? What I do is I sift through and I say, what is a powerful pointer? And that requires skeptical rationalism. It requires a filter for the mythical beliefs in the Bible and for the paraphernalia. It requires a rational filter, but it's not limited to that. It goes beyond rationalism. So if you notice yourself getting caught up in rationalism here and debating everything that I'm trying to say, what I'll gently remind you of is I am actually a very rational person, but I realize the limits of it. And my spiritual life is not about rationality. And it's not about irrationality, it's about post-rationality. Thanks for listening. If you liked this episode, please leave a review. And if you'd like to get in touch, you can email me at ross@deep-psychology.com. If you'd like to go deeper, head to deep-psychology.com for articles, courses, ebooks, and one-to-one coaching. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.